So today's topic, as we already said, is going to be how to improve your quarter-inch.
Because it's one of the 3 things that make your sewing
Accurate.
Yes.
Yes. And the other 2, if you don't know by now, include pressing properly, and we have a video on that. Well, a couple of videos on that actually. And then
Ironing, no.
pressing is
go.
a go. And then cutting accurately, because, frankly, if you start out with squares that aren't the right size or crooked or whatever, and then you attempt to sew them together, I don't know what you're going to get, but you're not going to get accuracy.
There are some fun techniques where they just take wacky pieces of fabric and sew them to a foundation and whack it up.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're talking about.
No. Actually, that reminds me. There are, so you don't get freaked out about your quarter-inch. There are a number of ways in which you can sew quilts that have nothing to do with being accurate. For example, you can do foundation paper piecing, and with that, the line is marked. And
on
so,
the paper or the muslin or whatever you're using as your foundation.
So if you can see the line and sew on a line, you're going to be accurate.
Yeah.
If you're doing flip corners, where you put a square in a corner of a block and you've marked a diagonal and you sew on that diagonal and then you flip or press the fabric back towards the corner, again, you're just sewing on a line.
Right.
Or if you're doing improv is awesome. So if you hate accuracy, improv is a wonderful way to go.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit more about improv. I don't believe I've ever sewn improv.
Well, improv
It sounds so French. I
It
don't
is
know.
improvisation.
No. I need a beret on.
It's where you're making artistic decisions as you're sewing. You don't have your pieces, your fabrics cut to a particular size. You sew them at different angles.
Okay, that's what I call freeform.
Yeah, okay. So freeform or improvisation or
Okay,
improv. Yeah, so
okay.
freeform is exactly that. There's no plan except kind of maybe a general design in your mind. You can make stars that way. You can make flying geese that way. You can make half square triangles that way. They all come out looking handmade and individual, like snowflakes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a wonderful way to go. And again, your accuracy doesn't matter until you get to the point where you're putting blocks together. At that point, they need to all be the same size. So with improv, a lot of times you'll just trim
But you're
them
not
down.
matching any seams, is what you're saying.
Right, yeah. So those are a lot of ways in which you can get completely off the accuracy treadmill.
Really, the only time you have to be accurate is when you're matching seams.
True. And sewing blocks together. Because if
you're matching seams, then.
I guess I'm thinking you mean matching seams across blocks, but you just mean matching the length of one seam to the same length of another seam. Okay, yeah, gotcha. Sorry, I'm a technical editor, so I get very literal with words. She knows about
things I don't know about. I know things that she doesn't know about. But we both know them. We just call them different things.
We speak different languages sometimes.
Yeah.
So we have to work that out. But anyway, so those are some of the reasons why you don't need to be accurate. But as we've said, the majority of the time with quilting, you do need to be accurate, don't you?
Yeah, because you're piecing and you want the seams to come together. Like, let's say, for instance, I just made up this little patch quilt here, and if all 4 of these fabrics didn't come together and make this little point, it would look kind of funny. If this seam was up here and this seam was down here, it'd look off.
Yeah.
And if that's the technique you're going for, bravo. But for this particular little quilt, you kind of want them to all match up.
You want some symmetry there. You don't want the eye to be looking at a seam that doesn't match up and notices that this red block is significantly lower than the white block above it or whatever. You want the seams to match so that the eye is looking at the pattern, which in this case is dark blocks alternating with lighter blocks.
Correct.
Very pretty.
Oh, nice. How nice.
And she just threw that together.
I did.
I just threw
that together yesterday.
She just said, hey, I'll just sit down and sew.
So when I do sit down to sew, and I'm sure we probably have similar setups, but I've brought my setup with me today. It's a little portable setup. Mm-hmm. But Jennifer's going to do her setup up in her studio later on, and you'll see that. But she asked me to bring all my setup, so I thought I would bring just exactly how I set up. If like I go to a retreat, or if I'm someplace not in my studio, like at Jennifer's studio.
She's quite at home right now. She's made
and
herself a little nest.
You do. You have to be comfortable. You have to have your things around you in the spot that you always have them. Because there's nothing more upsetting than to go look for your rotary cutter and it's not in the place it's supposed to be. Or your seam ripper. And I'm always looking for my seam ripper.
I was just thinking, boy, that never happens to me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, sure. All the time. Literally, I can lose my rotary cutter in about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Like, where is it? Because you put it in your hand and you walk around and then you put it down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's nice to have your ducks in a row.
Yeah. So I thought I'd go over a few things. I'm just sitting with my portable table that I can carry around anywhere. I've got a little pressing unit over here to my right-hand side because I'm right-handed, so my iron is right here, very accessible to my right hand. And then I have a little cutting mat here to my left so that I can do my cutting right here. And I'm not having to get up. I could probably sew a million, billion, zillion things just with this setup if I already had my fabrics all cut out, okay? So this is what I brought with me. I've got my cutting mat, and then I have this is a little cutter. There's a little blade in here for when I chain piece, and I'll show you about that in a few minutes.
That's an old rotary cutter blade.
It can. I guess
it's new. Maybe it's new.
It's new because I just bought it not too long ago because I thought it was so dang cute. It's green, so.
But you can put your slightly duller rotary cutter blades in there, and still, what she's going to be using that for is to break the threads between each of the things that she's chain piecing together.
Right. I have a stiletto at my my station, my little stiletto, in case I need to finagle some fabric. I have my seam ripper,
which we never have to use.
Right, you see, it's still got the cap on it.
Yeah.
So I use it all
Some
the
people
time.
call that Jack.
Yeah, Jack the Ripper. That's pretty funny. I've never heard that before.
So I'll go get Jack.
I have this little mini duster. That's probably something you don't have, or it's not a typical thing, but I can't stand all the dust on my sewing machine. So I'm all the time, dusting, getting things dusted because fabric is so dusty.
Oh my goodness.
So and then this is my little, it's an old paintbrush, but this is what I use to clean my sewing machine. I clean my sewing machine at every bobbin. Every time I change a bobbin, I clean my sewing machine. I clean under the foot. That's a good
habit to get into.
And where the bobbin goes in.
Where the bobbin is, yeah. Because if you're going to pull the bobbin out, you might as well take your needle plate off and really clean under there, and you won't believe how much lint and thread gets in there just through the length of one bobbin.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
It's amazing.
So that's a good habit to have.
I have a little screwdriver here because some of the parts of my machine take a screwdriver, and then I have a couple little gadgets here that help me with cleaning things and getting down deep in. I have a marking pencil, which is always important if you're going to mark anything.
It looks like you're similar to me in terms of marking. I like to mark with chalk.
Yeah, I love chalk.
Rather than an invisible ink or whatever.
No chemicals on mine. I don't want any chemicals that disappear.
Or maybe don't disappear.
Or don't disappear when they're supposed to disappear.
With chalk pencils, I've always had, better luck.
Oh,
and yours is the general, right?
Yeah, general pencil.
Yeah, and she's got a yellow one there, so that'll show up on darks.
Almost everything.
Yeah.
So
I tend to go with a white and a gray, but
a white and a gray.
I do have a yellow one too because you never know.
I didn't want to bring the whole sewing room. I just wanted to bring a little.
Well, she has moved
just in case.
And then, earlier, Zora, my cat, came by
cat.
and said hello, and normally she backs away. Like cats, they're a little reserved, and usually she disappears, but she hasn't.
She just thinks I'm part of the furniture.
I think she does.
Yeah. I have a little scrap of fabric so that I can sew on and off of, so I'm keeping control of my threads. I'll show you about that. Here's some little seam tape if you want to have an extended needle reference on the bed of your sewing machine. Seam guide tape is perfectly wonderful for that. And this is Cluck Cluck Sew Diagonal Seam Tape.
Yeah.
Okay. Now on my machine, I've got the same kind of thing, but it's Primitive Gatherings.
Yeah.
So,
but we talked earlier about how easy it is to sew on a line, and so these different kinds of tapes help you once you make the proper adjustments for your machine, and you know where that line needs to be to get your 1/4 inch.
Right.
It really will help.
Right.
A lot.
Right. Now I'm going to talk about my sewing machine, and I think sewing machines are like your toothbrush. They're extremely personal, and you're not going to let anybody else use it. Okay?
Boy, that is true.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reason being is because if your sewing machine gets out of whack, it has to go to the doctor. There's nothing you can do about it. And that means don't sew over pins, because if you sew over pins, that could whack it up.
A big time.
Big time.
Yeah, it might change the timing of your...
Right.
It might prevent you from... It'll probably prevent you from sewing, and it will mean that the timing's off, and it has to go to the spa to be fixed.
Right.
You won't be able to sew with it.
As far as the brand of sewing machine, what I think is the very first sewing machine that you get, that's the brand you're probably going to stick with, because you're going to know the buttons, you're going to know where everything is, because machines are basically, the mechanics of a sewing machine are basically the same, but there are things that you want to look for. The number one thing you want to look for is a sewing machine dealer. You don't want to buy a sewing machine.
Oh, I totally believe that, because my first sewing machine I bought from a dealer, but at a quilt show, because it was a heck of a deal. Well, this was in Ohio. I live in Indiana.
Yeah.
So basically, I had no dealer.
Right.
I mean, my local quilt shop that sold the same brand supported me as well as it could and everything, but it wasn't the same relationship.
Right.
You really, really, really don't want to buy. I totally
You
agree.
want your machine.
You don't want to buy one from Target or Walmart or whatever. I'm sorry. Or Amazon, for God's sake.
Right.
You just don't.
Right. Well, my first sewing machine I bought at Sears. It was a Kenmore. Yeah. That's back when Sears was on every block, and they carried everything from gloves to refrigerators. I mean, they had everything. And I was newly married and couldn't afford a lot. So I bought the best machine I could, not knowing anything about a sewing machine dealer. I didn't even know there was such a thing, because I was buying the machine to make curtains and pillows and do home decor, because I was newly married. And
I'm smiling because that's why I bought my first machine.
Yeah.
So to make pillows and things to decorate my apartment.
But once I learned that there were quilt shops and sewing machine centers and people out there that will support your sewing machine and help you take care of it, and if you should run into any problems, we'll solve those problems for you. It's just like the normal person probably doesn't work on their own car. You see?
Yeah.
So you don't normally work on your own sewing machine.
So you want a good mechanic someplace.
You want a good mechanic, and you buy your machine from that person so you can have a good relationship with them. And buy the best you can afford.
Whatever that is.
But make sure it comes along with a technical person or a dealer or someplace you can go and talk to somebody about if you have a problem. So my very first sewing machine after my Kenmore was a Bernina, because I worked at a store that sold Berninas. And so Bernina is what I've sewn on a Bernina for 35 years now. I'm used to it. I'm used to how it's set up. I'm used to my 1/4 inch always being in the same place. And you would think that a 1/4 seam is just what it says, a 1/4 seam. But your needle comes down, and a 1/4 of an inch away from your needle is your 1/4 inch. Are you going to sew a scant 1/4 inch? What does that even mean? Are you going to sew a perfect 1/4 inch? What does that even mean? Are you going to sew a wide 1/4 inch? What does that even mean? Personally, I sew a direct 1/4 inch because I press open. If I was pressing to one side, I would sew a scant quarter inch
Yeah.
because I would need that little bitty space that the fabric folds over. And if it's double the fabric, it's going to take up a thread or two of measurement. So if you want to make sure that you're doing all the things.
That's right. And that's where the term scant quarter inch comes from. It means sewing slightly narrower than a quarter inch away from your needle. And again, the reason is if you're going to be pressing your fabric over, you have to allow for that. So during this we'll get to the process
Right.
of learning how to sew accurately. And
Right.
during that process, you'll be testing and testing
Right.
until you figure out on your particular machine
Where-
with its own feet and mechanics
Right.
how you can get that quarter inch. And what you're really looking for is not what you're sewing, but what the result ends up being.
Correct.
The result of sewing something, a seam, and then pressing. You want that to be accurate. That's what you're massaging and achieving with the testing. And we'll get to that. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Right.
But anyway, a
So that all
scant quarter inch just simply means sewing with a slightly narrower seam. And if a pattern tells you to do that, it's because they're anticipating you're going to be pressing your seams to one side and not open.
Right. Exactly.
And I'm exactly, non-surprisingly, I'm exactly like Dawn in the fact that I sew an accurate quarter inch. My machine actually has mechanics built into it that easily achieves that for me. And then by pressing my seams open, I get the accurate measurement for each of my block units and everything.
That's
So anyway.
awesome.
So
I've got a few feet here that I wanted to talk about. First of all, every machine, even my featherweight machine at home, has a quarter inch foot. It may not come with your machine. If it doesn't come with your machine, purchase it separate. If it does come with your seam, wonderful. So that's my quarter inch foot. And then I have an open-toed foot that I like to use. Like if I'm zigzagging or doing a decorative stitch, I want to be able to see where my needle is going. And so I use that quite a bit. I don't ever use the foot that comes on the machine,
purpose.
the general purpose. I don't ever even use it. And then the other foot that I use is my walking foot. And every machine will have a walking foot accessible to it,
or that you can buy.
Yeah, that you can add on or it comes with. And it's a funky looking thing, and this just has to go over the take up lever, and this, however it's supposed to go in, your manual will show you. But basically they work the same. They have feed dogs on the top. Some machines have it already built in. What is that called when it's already built in? Even feed foot.
Something like
yes,
that.
Even feed.
But
You're
some
right.
have them built in.
Right.
Anyway, I won't name brands, but
Right.
but some different models will have that built in, which
Right.
is nice.
Right. I think
And-
Granina
and-
has a model that they're built in.
Yeah, and I think all the big ones have them now built in, and you press a button or flip a switch or do whatever it is that your machine tells you to do, and then it activates even feed. And why do you want even feed? What's that doing?
Well, when
for
you've
you?
got a bulk of fabric or when you've got several layers, let's say you're doing quilting and you're doing just straight line quilting, and you've got a fabric on the bottom, a batting in the middle, and your quilt on top, and that's 3 layers.
and you want them to stay even with each other.
And you don't want them shifting around. So if only thing that is pulling your fabric are the feed dogs, your bottom fabric is going to go places that your top fabric isn't going to go. Mm-hmm. So what you need is a presser foot that presses down and makes both things,
feed at the same time.
3 layers going through the machine at the same time, making them an even feed foot. So very great.
Important accessory to get or something to look for with your machine.
When I put binding on, I use my walking foot.
Yes, that's
because I've got all those layers. I've actually got 5 layers. I've got the back fabric.
Yes.
The batting. I've got the top fabric, and I fold over my. So I have 5 layers. So definitely, I'm getting out my even feed foot for that.
I think before we continue, it's something that you may not have caught, but very important. Your machine most likely will come with what is known as a general all-purpose kind of sewing foot.
Yes.
And if you try to use the edge of that foot and sew a seam, use the edge of the foot as your guide and sew a seam, 99% of the time that will not be a 1/4 inch from the needle.
Correct.
So it's great that you have an all-purpose foot. It's a general sewing foot that you can use for all different sorts of things, but not really as helpful as a 1/4 inch foot for quilting.
Right.
So make sure that when you buy a machine,
like I say, I've never used mine. I have never ever used.
I do occasionally.
You do?
Yeah,
well, I always go to this open-toed foot.
Well,
it's the same foot except for all this in here is open. It's the same foot as my number 1 foot, but all this
so
is
you can
open
see a little bit
instead of having.
You can see the needle. And
Yeah.
you can see in front of the needle.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's
I can
important
see
too.
what the stitch is
So
doing. Yeah.
so yeah, it's probably one of my least used.
Yeah.
feet, but I do. I know I have used to be.
But I only quilt.
Okay. Yeah, I do some general purpose
So,
stuff,
you know, if you're doing things like curtains or you're doing, you know, I don't know, what else do you make with fabric? I just make quilts. No, I don't.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
Pillows, totes.
Yeah. Anything.
Mug rugs.
Yeah,
I don't know, but
anything
that's
where
more
you,
quilting.
yeah. So anyway, and then this other thing that helps me with my accuracy is that I went ahead and purchased a single whole plate. And you can see the difference here. Here are my 2 plates.
Over here is the general purpose plate that comes with her sewing machine. And notice it has a vertical or horizontal hole that allows the needle to go back and forth.
Right
if you're
here
going to do
is
a zigzag or something like that.
There's a round hole and then there's a wide open space right there. That's if I'm doing zigzags or if I'm doing some kind of a decorative stitch, my needle will float back and forth into that hole.
And then this other one is called a single hole needle plate. And the reason we recommend that for quilting is, number one, if you've ever run into that problem with your fabric kind of getting a little sucked into the underneath as you start sewing, this will more or less prevent that from happening.
It'll help, definitely.
It will definitely help. It also helps, I think, with the tension.
It does help. Mm-hmm. I think you're right.
So it's not going to be something that comes with your machine by default, typically, unless you're getting a higher end machine that includes a lot of accessories.
Right.
But boy, howdy, that was the first purchase I made for my Bernina back. My first machine happened to be a Bernina as well. I own a Janome now, but
let's name some of the higher end, not higher end, but the more reputable.
Yeah, I think
say.
if I was going, I mean, just in my humble opinion, if I was looking to buy any machine, and I bought Janome because that happens to be the type of machine being sold at my quilt store, and I really fell in love with it. But Bernina would be up there. Absolutely perfect, great German engineered machine. Janome, I can't say enough about them. They're just lovely, lovely, perfectly engineered machines. And by the way, Janome makes a lot of the other machines out there, and they slap their name on them. So there, a lot of times that is Janome. And then I think that the third biggest one for me is a Pfaff. I think a Pfaff is a good, great machine. Now there are a lot of other companies out there.
There's Viking.
Name. There's Viking. There's Husqvarna.
Viking.
I think I don't know that the quality to me is as good, but that's
I've never sewn on those. I've sewn on a Janome and I've sewn on a Bernina, and I've sewed on a Pfaff because my mom owned a Pfaff at one time, but I didn't do a lot. I just mostly helped her.
I'm basing my rather general opinion based on what I've seen other quilters experience at quilt sew-togethers and retreats and things like that. And when I was first starting to quilt and learn and whatever, I was observing quite a lot. And you notice who has problems and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And there's certain machines that people have those 3 that I just named,
Yeah.
they don't seem to ever have the problem.
Right.
And then the other ones,
Yeah.
they do. Now, it could be any number of reasons why.
Mm-hmm.
But that was just kind of that opinion that I formed ages ago. And
Yeah.
so that's what I recommend. What about
So,
you?
well, it's funny that you asked because, well, it's not funny because that's what we're talking about. But at a retreat one time, there were over 200 ladies there. So we went around and took a survey of all the machines that were there. Guess which one the most people were sewing with?
I don't know.
Guess
to me,
what
it
brand?
probably Bernina or Janome.
The Featherweight.
Oh, get out of town, of course.
I am not kidding. The Singer Featherweight won out by a mile.
Because it's a, not only is it, you can't, it's an all metal, wonderfully engineered, classically engineered machine from the days when things were really made to last.
And simple.
Simple and lightweight and easy to take to
Easy
retreat.
to take.
So yes, I should have guessed that.
Yeah,
because that's a lot of people, that's their go-to take to class kind of machine. Because it does everything perfectly. I mean, if all you're doing is sewing straight.
Right.
And it's lightweight.
Yeah.
So duh. Oh, I should have guessed.
Yeah. So anyway, that was kind of funny. But the things that I look for when I went to buy my sewing machine, and I have upgraded over the years. I think this is maybe my 6th one.
That's a lot newer than mine.
Well,
mine lasted for a lot longer than it should have.
Yeah.
But it's a lot older model than the one we're looking at here.
The thing that I look for is the lighting. The lighting was and I loved my old machine, but it just had the one bulb lighting. Mm-hmm. And then now they've come out with this LED lighting. Ooh la la.
Oh my gosh.
I traded my other one just because I needed this light. Now that was ridiculous, but it's true. It was, this lighting just was the bee's knees for me.
Now don't despair if you purchased your machine and maybe it doesn't have the best lighting. In the description of this video, I'll link to any number of things out on Amazon that are LED lighting accessories that you can easily
you can add
to your machine.
Definitely.
To light up where you're sewing. You want to see that needle.
Right.
And you want to see your foot and the fabric.
Right.
And that helps a lot with accuracy
too.
Right.
Another thing I like about the Bernina is that it has slip-on feet. So all I have to do is just slip this right on a little post, push my little button down, and my foot is on. I don't have to undo or unscrew anything. Another thing I like is that my faceplate just snaps off and on. And I don't have
that
to...
That is lovely, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't have to unscrew anything.
Yeah.
I do like an oscillating bobbin. That means my bobbin's not up here rotating. It's down here on the face of the sewing machine. And it is an oscillating bobbin. It goes like this. Okay? And...
So her bobbin on a Bernina, it loads this way.
Yeah, it loads into the machine
not
like this.
Drops down.
Right.
And that does mean that the mechanics of the sewing for the machine is different. I've owned both. Mm-hmm. My Janome is a drop-in kind, and I've owned Bernina, which has the hook and you put it in this way. So they both can achieve the same results, but they do work differently.
This machine has a whole bunch of fancy stuff I know nothing about. It's got memory. I don't know.
We always have a billion stitches we never use.
Never use them. But I do like my needle up, needle down button. Of course, every sewing machine has a reverse button. But in quilting, we don't use that very much.
No,
now,
really.
when we do bags and pin cushions and stuff, extra yummy things, we will use our backup button.
Yeah.
But mine, and one thing I want to tell everybody is that the new machines have a start and stop button, and not everybody uses a foot control.
Yeah. I grew up with a foot control, and I guess that's what I'm used to.
Me too.
But mine has a stop start button as well, and it's kind of fun.
It freaks me out. Because I'm afraid someday there's going to be machines that are not going to have a foot control.
Oh.
And then you'll only be able to use the start and stop.
I don't want to have to relearn, do you?
Well, it might be past we may be dead and in the grave by the time they get there.
Well, that's a happy thought.
Yeah. So there you go. I always carry an extra set of bobbins with me. This one has a stand-up spool and a horizontal spool. And I like that because different spools are wound different. So read your manual, make sure you're making the thread come off the spool the way it's supposed to. Your settings, learn about your machine from your manual. Take a class with the person you bought it from and get to know your machine. That's basically the number one thing that I can express that I think is most important, is that you get to know your machine. When you get a new machine, even if I get a new Bernina, it takes me maybe a month to get used to
how it does things.
Does things, how it works.
Because there be minor differences.
Well, my new Bernina is a computer based 100%, and it takes it time to boot up just like a computer. And it was like I was calling my dealer saying, hello, my machine is not turning on. I've got the on button. He says, well, you got to be a little patient. It's a computer. It's got to boot up. So, you get to know each machine has its own little finagly things that you learn about it. But basically, a machine is a machine. They basically you run the thread through the basic same way and everything like that. So get to know your machine. Another thing I have by me is my pair of scissors and my pressing spot. And I think I'm ready to go. I cleaned it before we started. It is very important to me that my sewing machine stays clean and oiled. Now, some machines don't have to be oiled.
Yeah.
So you read your manual.
Read your manual and or ask the dealer whether you should be oiling it or not,
right?
Because you could be doing something that the machine does not want you to do,
right?
But if it does want oil, it's good to oil it at the very least before the start of every project. And then changing to a fresh needle.
Mine has a little on my screen. It has a little oil can. Tells me when it needs to be.
Oh,
oiled.
it does. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, because she's got a computer just telling her.
Yeah, just telling me everything. Telling me my smartwatch told me that I was too loud the other day. You're in a very loud environment. I was teaching, so I had my teaching voice on, and I was in a very loud environment. So I thought that was pretty funny.
I think before we actually get to the sewing part, something else we might want to point out are the markings on the needle plate and what they mean.
Oh, let's do that then.
So that they can figure out what they're supposed to be paying attention to and what
Okay.
they're not. You'll notice that there are lines on either side on your needle plate, and they'll be marked, like an 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, whatever, a 1/2 inch, 5/8. So that's telling you that's the distance from the needle when that particular needle plate is installed.
And there are some horizontal lines also if you're trying to get your piece in there perfectly straight.
Yes, and that helps with that.
I have never used the lines on my plate except for to line up my cluck sew. That's the only time I ever use those lines.
And that's when I use it too.
Yeah.
Because that's telling you, measured out, engineering,
how to get it straight.
Exactly what the distance is from the needle. And so that helps me when I'm installing the lined tape.
Yeah.
To make sure that it's not only straight on the needle, but also accurate.
Right.
As far as the measurement from the needle.
Right.
But so anyway, just in case you're wondering what those are for, there's just different measurements for you, and that's the distance from the needle.
Right. So the next the test I do every single time that I'm sewing on a new machine, or if I think my machine is out of alignment, or any time that I need to know absolutely that my 1/4 inch is accurate, the one that the thing that I'm counting on my machine. And what I do is I count on my 1/4 inch foot. Now some 1/4 inch foots have a little arm that hangs down. It's kind of a guide that you can butt your fabric up against.
Yeah.
I don't like those.
I don't either, because
They get in my way.
Well, they can also bend, because they're, I mean, if you're not terribly careful with them, because it's just a thin piece of metal that's attached to the side of the foot that you can put your fabric up against, and that's great, but it can bend a little bit, and if it bends outward, then your accuracy will change.
Right.
So I personally don't like those either. I do like to use the edge of my foot as a guide, because on my particular machine that gives you the most accuracy.
Right, correct. And my foot, which I love this foot. Let me show you. Here's my needle coming down like this. This right here is a perfect 1/4 inch. Now I can't be beyond that. I can't see my fabric. My fabric is just riding right along my 1/4 inch right here. But also on my fabric is a 1/4 inch and an 1/8 of an inch. This little tooth inside here is an 1/8 of an inch. So it's really more than a 1/4 inch foot. It's also an 1/8 inch foot, which is really, really nice when you're top stitching.
Yes,
or
my foot has that kind of measurement as well.
Or if you need to stop a 1/4 inch from the edge, it gives you that little marking.
Mine has a little mark too.
So your feet also have marks on them. So get to know that too. And I tell you, there's a YouTube video for everything out there. So if you do get a new foot and you don't know what all it does, go ahead and Google that or search for that in your YouTube channel, and it'll probably show you.
Like she could type in Bernina 37, number 37 foot, and it would take her to a video or something, some kind of resource that would tell her what the markings on the foot mean. They're there for a reason.
Yes, they are.
And they're there to help you. But
Correct.
if you don't understand the foot, you're kind of throwing away the extra help that you paid for when you bought your machine.
Right.
So before we get started on actually testing our 1/4 inch and then achieving accuracy, I'm going to move to another video source, and so we can get up close and personal with what you're doing.
Okay. Should I clap?
As soon as I get ready,
She's... I'm always anxious to clap.
She is. She likes clapping.
I like to clap.
First, I have to...
Just to get all set up.
Yeah, I have to log into my husband's phone and then get that video.
We stole his phone.
Okay, I'm going to take a little good shot of overhead of what Dawn has been pointing out. This is all the tools that she has. These are the feet. This is her setup.
Look at where I keep my pin cushion. My brother gave me this really sticky stuff that's for cell phones in your bathroom. I mean, in your car. And so it was a perfect little spot for me. And it doesn't go anywhere.
And what is that stuff underneath the pin cushion again?
It's the stuff that you put on your dashboard to keep your cell phone from sliding off.
Oh my goodness, that's perfect.
I just cut it in half. I got one for my machine that I travel with. My machine.
That. And then
isn't
here's
that pretty
the
nice?
pressing station that she was talking about.
Yep, there's
It's
my
right
pressing
there.
station, my iron. You know, I've got it all right here.
And then here's where she was talking about the thread, and she's got.
Here's my spool that's horizontal. Here's my spool that's vertical.
And then let's see down here.
Here's where I keep my scissors. I have a little. These are for cell phones, you know, to keep your finger on. I just stuck it there. Yeah, it's nice to have your little scissors right available, and not taking up space in your.
And then,
on your,
as she said, to the left, she's got her,
cutting.
you know, where she can cut and measure and trim and do all that for her. And then she's got her stylus and her diagonal seam tape and the.
I like to keep all my little things right
her
here
little
handy.
Tools. And then this is the type of. This is by who again?
Primitive
Gatherings. This is the tape that they use, as opposed to the cluck cluck so diagonal seam tape.
If I use the cluck cluck so, I have to put on 2 pieces because I like to have a 1/2 inch instead of just a 1/4 of an inch.
So I think I've done a nice little scan of where everything is.
Yeah.
So from your point of view, they can see what you're doing. So now what do we do?
Okay, so the first thing that I do is I sew on to something that I don't care about, which I call a leader and an ender.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to have one at the beginning and I'm going to have one at the end.
Now, why do you do that?
Well,
I know why I do.
It controls my thread. I don't have all those threads hanging out all over the place, causing me nasty anxiety because there's threads everywhere. And it helps to keep my thread from going down. Remember we talked about that single hole plate? I do not want my fabric to be down into my feed dogs.
No, you don't want it to be sucked down in there.
Right.
And it prevents that. It helps you get the proper thread tension before you start sewing onto your fabric.
Definitely. And you know how a lot of times if you don't hold your threads, it gets a nest underneath when you begin to sew.
Yeah.
This will eliminate that also.
Yeah.
So
it's
a leader and an ender for me is a must.
Yeah. Now some people will have like a scrappy project that they just do, and they use those as leaders and enders, so they're always sewing onto something. It's just ideally you need to sew from some fabric onto the thing you're making.
So I always have a little project over here to the side of my sewing machine, and a lot of times it's 1 inch squares, but these just happen to be 2.5 inch squares. I'll just put that together, and this will be my leader. And then when I get done sewing, I'll pick up another one. It'll be my ender.
And that way she's just making a little bit of progress on this
I can have
ancillary scrappy project.
I can have a 4-patch just in one pass.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a leader and ender can be anything. It can be just a scrappy.
Or it can be an actual, project.
A little nothing project that you just use your scraps and do.
Okay.
But here's the test. Here's my test. I have 3 pieces of fabric. And I cut them 1.5. Let's see. Well, this is... I cut them 1.5 by 3.5. So there's 1.5 by 3.5.
Okay.
And maybe he can put a little 1.5 and 3.5 in the graphics because, he's smart that way. And so I cut 3 of those. 1.5 by 3.5.
So when you sew them together,
look what's going to happen.
And what should that measure if you're accurate?
Well, let me just see. I'm going to make sure they're accurate. Now see how they're both the same size? That's a good sign that my cutting was good.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to put it here in my machine. I know right exactly where my 1/4 inch is because I've sewn on this machine a lot. Now I'm going to sew on one of my enders because I've ended the seam there.
I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so we can see just a bit more. There, that's great.
So I'm going to put this little... Now this is my ender. My ender is just about as big as my whole project here.
Yeah. Well, because you're actually making something with those leaders and enders.
When you sew and sew and sew on something, it's called chain piecing. So if I was actually making a rail fence, this is a block that could be a rail fence just by turning it when I sew it together. If I were sewing a bunch of these, see, I could just keep sewing the first set. And then when I take them out of my machine, they're all hooked together. And that's when I use my little thing here. And there's a little razor blade in there, a little rotary cutter blade.
And that went so fast, I don't know if they saw, but
I'll have some more to do here
she
in a minute.
ran it through there.
Yeah.
With
and
just
if I have a
tiny bit of pressure, and that rotary cutter just cuts those threads there.
And if I had a whole bunch of them, I'd just be going
bing, 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 bing. Yep.
And it just Speedy Gonzalez.
And would you be doing it with the sound effects?
I would be doing it with the sound effects. Now I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to press my seam open.
Okay.
Didn't
and that's
bring
what
my clapper.
She's doing over there at her pressing station.
Yeah, just trust me. I'm pressing that seam open. Pressing that. Oh, my machine. It's one of those that has to warm up when it's not being used.
Yes, I'm sorry. I think it must have. It's an older iron, and it must have turned itself off.
Okay.
So she's just going to hold it there for a second and let it warm up, and
I need my clapper. I don't know why I didn't bring it.
I have a clapper for you.
Well, no,
we can stop.
This is fine.
Okay,
so see how I've pressed open? And I can feel that there's no lumpy fabric. Sometimes when you press over, there's a big lump right there. This lays perfectly flat, and there's no fabric overlap.
Yes, that's something to check for if you're pressing to the side or even if you're pressing open. You want both. You don't want it to look like part of the fabric is over here or whatever.
There can't be any fold of the fabric. The fabric just needs to lay side by side.
Yeah, it needs to be flat and not folded onto itself.
Yeah.
Because that will affect accuracy.
Exactly. Now I'm going to lay this on top.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is 3 pieces of 1.5 by 3.5. And I'm going to get my leader and ender back. Now again, if you don't have a little project that you're doing, that's fine. You can just use a scrap piece of fabric. This, I think, is a piece of binding that I was doing. Just, the little extra.
Yeah, I keep the little scraps in a bag right by my machine. So if I decide to do that, that's what I'm doing. Otherwise, I'm doing a leader ender project.
So then I have my scissors here, and I'm just going to take that off. And see, already I have a 4 patch that I can, if I stopped and press this open, I have a cute little 4 patch.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm making 2 at a time. So I'm going to press this, opening it up with my finger, kind of doing a finger press since I don't have my clapper.
Well, if this doesn't end up being exactly accurate,
it will.
We'll stop and get my clapper.
No, I know how to press without a clapper. I did it for years. So, okay. Now.
Well, I want you to feel at home.
Oh, thank you. Well, why I didn't grab my clapper? I mean, how can I go anywhere without my clapper?
I don't know. Dawn without her clapper
that's
is
crazy.
Kind of like,
yeah.
What is that?
Eggs without bacon, I'd say. Okay, so now this should measure if my cutting was accurate, my pressing was accurate, and my 1/4 inch was accurate. Mm-hmm. The 3 things. This should measure a 3.5 inch square.
Right.
Okay. So let's lay the ruler on there, and look at that. 3.5 inch square, and there's nothing showing on any of the sides, and it is totally accurate.
Woohoo!
Yay!
Now that may not happen for our viewers for every, so we're going to need to show what you do if it's not right. But bang on, she has accuracy, and that's what you're trying to achieve.
Right, because now that if I want to sew these together. This one has to be 3.5. This one has to be 3.5 so that they can go together. You don't want one bigger than the other. Even though you're not matching seams, mm-hmm. you still want them to be the same size.
Yes.
Okay? So only by sewing accurately can I get them all to be the same size. Now you say to yourself, well, if you don't sew accurately, but you're consistent in how inaccurate you are, no, that doesn't work, okay? Because the cutting allows for a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Mm-hmm. So it has to be accurate. Because once you start putting all the elements together, that's when you're going to get into trouble if you don't have the accurate seam.
And I know you're thinking, well, I can just stretch this or push that or whatever and get them to fit. Get them to sew together. But that's not really accurate. And what you're going to end up with is ripples and...
Right, your quilt's not going to lay flat. Yeah. And that's the whole idea, is you want the quilt to lay flat. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to sew these together. But I'm going to take the side that has the seams and I'm going to put them up, and the side that doesn't have any seams, I'm going to put it down. Now you can't always do that because sometimes there's seams on both. Mm-hmm. Okay, but that's when the pinning comes in. Now
so
I'm
what you're
a
saying
pinner.
Is if you always want, if one side doesn't have seams and the other one does, you want the side that has seams to be up
so I can see
them.
So
you can see them. So if they're going to flip or whatever.
Yes, but they're not going to flip because I'm going to pin them. So
I'm a pinner too.
I'm a pinner. And so my machine's going to go, and then my feed dogs are going to want to lift that up like that. I don't want my feed dogs to do that, so I'm going to pin that down.
Yeah. So you pin the leading seam, as it were.
Yes, I do.
The one that will be closest, first encountered by the needle.
This is laying with the way that the sewing machine is sewing. So I don't have to worry about this one. Mm-mm. It's already laying that way. This is the one that's going to get caught in my seam.
And twisted or
with
moved
my foot.
or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So
and
that's where you want to pin.
And do you see how my blocks are exactly the same width? Mm-hmm. And so now I'm going to sew. And a lot of people think that they need to get their pins way down like that. Don't, because then you can't pull them out.
No, you need to be able to pull them out so you don't sew over them.
Yeah.
We talked about that, didn't we?
Don't sew over your pins.
Oh, heck no, baby.
Okay, so now I'm just going to... And when I come to a pin, I'm going to take it out. When I come to a pin, I'm going to take it out. I'm going to sew on my leader and my ender. This is an ender because I'm ending.
There you go.
And now I'm going to press that open. And you'll see how nice and flat that lies.
Now, if we wanted to measure that,
yeah,
that should measure 3.5 by 6.5 at this point.
Correct.
And I don't know about you. I measure things as I go, so
yes.
I can make corrections if needed.
Yes.
Unsew and resew. Use jack.
You know, I used to do that, but
it just depends.
It depends upon how many components I've sewn together. Like if I've just made this one seam, I know this is perfectly accurate because I know this was accurate. I know this was accurate. I know my 1/4 inch is accurate. So I know this is going to be 6.5. Right there it is. 6.5 by 3.5 because, you know, I've sewn it accurate. So I know. Mm-hmm. But if I started getting 10 or 12 of these together to make a bigger block, maybe, I want to stop and you know, make sure I'm still on the right track. But this kind of pattern doesn't necessarily mean that you have to match up any seams. See that?
Oh.
I'm just kidding.
Well, go home now.
Get out!
And that's the end of our episode. That's the end of Dawn. No.
The cat doesn't want you here anymore.
If you don't see Dawn on this channel anymore, you'll know why.
So if you'll get a good shot of my beautiful points there.
Yes. Look at that. Just gorgeous. And if we go way in and let it zoom in, we can see, look at that. Oh my goodness. That's what you want to achieve.
That's what you want to achieve.
I share this office space with my computer desk and also with my husband. So I've got a rather compact sewing area, but for me it works. But Janome on this model offers something called an HP needle plate, and that's what they call high precision. And that plus the HP foot, which is this one, combine to create a system that provides me with an accurate 1/4 inch with like no fuss. And then hope we bless you with a perfect 1/4 inch.
Yes, that's what we hope.
Bye for now.
Bye.